Hello, Internet. Vinnie D here, coming to you live once again from the Fortress of Fragitude. I want to welcome you to my new show, Vinnie Rants, where I talk about just about damn near anything. Except politics. You just don't go political. You just fucking don't. But today I want to talk to you about something just as controversial. We're talking two major forces and strongly divided bases. Who can possibly triumph? I'm talking about the two big bads, the two gigantic kings of the monsters, Godzilla and King Kong. So, Kong, Skull Island just came out. Just saw it still riding high on the big monkey. And I'm thinking this Kong really has a shot against Godzilla. If you haven't heard, yes, it's been announced, 2020, it's happening again. For the first time in 50 years, Godzilla versus King Kong. It's gonna be frickin' badass, whatever it is. So let's get down to the details. Can Kong take Godzilla? First of all, size difference. Now, if you go back to the originals, the original King Kong was only 25 feet tall. Now, that was big for a 1930s monster. But the original Godzilla was 150 feet tall. That's a lot bigger. So when it came time back in the 60s for King Kong and Godzilla to square off, they had to even them out a bit. The Kong in the Toho movies, yes, there were two Toho Kong movies if you haven't seen the other one, King Kong Escapes, but I'm getting off topic here. They were the same size roughly. Kong about 148 feet tall, Godzilla as tall as his original incarnation at around 150 feet tall, roughly the same size. And we all know what happened in that movie. Or if you don't, King Kong won the day. Partially thanks to an extra power Toho gave him, not in the original, of absorbing lightning, and Godzilla having a weakness left over from the first movie to electricity. If you recall, he avoided high voltage lines. At that time, Godzilla did not like electricity. Later movies, he adjusted. In fact, got stronger from lightning strikes. But at the time, that was one of Kong's big advantages. I won't go into the whole Frankenstein thing, and this was probably a carryover from another idea. Anyway, Kong won. Sorry, no, there is not a Japanese version where Godzilla won. The only differences are a few minor audio changes, mainly being that both are heard roaring at the end of the movie, implying Godzilla survived the fight, because of course he did, there are later movies anyway, but clearly he was repelled from his rampage by Kong, and Kong returned home to his island triumphant. Kong would of course have another appearance in a Toho movie, King Kong Escapes, where Godzilla does not appear, but the movie still seems to be canon because Gorosaurus, one of the enemies from Kong's Island, appears in Destroy All Monsters. Toho can't make more Kong movies, but what happened is still canon. Godzilla still got his ass kicked. And this isn't the only time Godzilla has had his ass kicked, I remind you. Mothra beat him too. How does this apply to the new upcoming King Kong vs. Godzilla? Well, let's look at the newest versions of Kong and Godzilla. Legendary Pictures' Godzilla is the largest incarnation of Godzilla yet. Godzilla's steadily been getting bigger over the years. I mean, he started out at 150 feet and is now 300 and something odd feet. I don't have the reference on me, but more than doubled in size. Kong has been a bit all over the place. Of course, the King Kong vs. Godzilla version of Kong was as tall as original Godzilla, but would only be half the size of legendary Godzilla, but is still the biggest Kong so far. There was the 2005 Peter Jackson remake, which was extremely loyal to the original and an excellent movie, but Kong was still only 25 feet tall. But this isn't the Kong we're talking about. No, we're talking about the newest Kong. Not quite the biggest, but well up there at 100 feet tall even. And they said, in this movie, he's still growing. He's gonna have another 40 years on him by the time he squares off with Godzilla. If you didn't know, this movie is based in the early 70s, in the post-Vietnam era, and Kong will be fighting Godzilla in the present day when the movie comes out at 2020. So he's gonna have plenty of time to get bigger. He could be eye to eye with Godzilla. I think that's what they're going to be going for, an even size. So the next question, what are their abilities? Godzilla is extremely tough. Aside from being freaking huge and immeasurably strong, he has his atomic breath. It's not fire, it's radiation. Godzilla will set off your Geiger counter just being in the general area. Plus, he has extremely dense scales protecting him from harm. So, he's basically a dragon. A dragon on steroids and nuclear fuel. He is a walking nuclear reactor. That's going to make him hard as hell for Kong to beat. Especially since he has a much tougher hide than the softer mammalian gorilla. So now I'm getting into spoiler territory for Kong. What is the newest Kong capable of? Let's dispel the fire question right away. People say, furry gorilla? Flammable. Godzilla breathes fire. No, Godzilla doesn't breathe fire, as I just said. He has atomic breath. And we generally haven't seen him set anything on fire in any movie. Aside from things that would catch on fire from a natural disaster anyway. We've never seen his atomic breath set something else on fire like another kaiju. Besides that, in Kong Skull Island, they address the fire issue. Initially, some napalm is spread out across a lake that Kong is crossing. Kong is initially repelled by the fire, doesn't seem to be heavily injured by it. And this is where Kong shows his biggest advantage. He's smart. This could be the smartest Kong we've yet seen. He figures out that the napalm is floating on the water's surface, and turns it to his advantage by splashing the water up and whipping the napalm back at the soldiers attacking him. Kong can wield fire to his own advantage. In fact, Kong rather extensively uses things in his environment and weapons in this movie. This Kong is clever. Godzilla fights largely with his own body. Kong is going to have a huge equalizing factor in his ability to use weapons. First time you see him use a weapon, he basically turns a tree into a javelin. He understands projectiles. He understands flight characteristics and manages to knock a helicopter out of the air by spearing it with a tree in midair. And near the climax of the movie, he grabs the remains of a ship, ripping off a boat anchor and a huge engine with a gigantic fan blade on it, and uses it as some sort of gigantic flail Morning Star whip thing. He's clearly smart enough to figure out how this strange object moves and how to weaponize it to win the final battle. And that kind of intelligence, I think, is really going to start to turn things in his favor against Godzilla. Next up is speed. Kong is going to have a huge speed and agility advantage. Godzilla is not fast in the Legendaries Pictures version. At least not above water. Underwater, yes, he's a fast swimmer, but he's a gigantic, sluggish, tail-dragging thing on land. And on land, Kong is going to dominate the battle. Don't know how well Kong can swim in this version. The Toho version of Kong, great swimmer. He could swim long distances if he wanted to. In fact, that's what he does at the end of both movies, is just jump in the ocean and swim home. But there's no comparing to an animal that is naturally at home underwater. So Kong's real advantage is going to be keeping this on land. If there are tall enough objects for him to climb, even better. But as big as he is, they're going to have to be mountains. Buildings are not going to be big enough for Kong. Well, maybe some really tall ones, depends on where the battle happens. But his ability to attack from multiple vectors, so another huge advantage in Kong's corner. Basically, this is going to be fast versus tank. Godzilla can take a lot of damage, but I think King Kong is going to be dishing it out faster than Godzilla. Last, weaknesses and durability. Kong has shown that he can be injured a bit more easily than Godzilla. In Kong Skull Island, he's lightly injured by bullets and helicopter blades, unlike the original King Kong, which was killed by bullets. These are more like paper cuts, mild annoyances to him. They didn't really impede his ability to fight. And remember, he's going to be bigger and tougher by Godzilla vs. King Kong. Of course, that still isn't going to match up to the thick, scaly hide of Godzilla. Being able to injure Godzilla is going to be tough for King Kong. He's going to have to go for the soft parts. And this is one thing he can exploit that the Mutos in the legendary Godzilla back in 2015 did as well. This version of Godzilla has one glaring weak point. He has exposed gills. Now this makes sense for an amphibious creature. Gills and lungs. He can survive indefinitely above and underwater. But those gills serve as a weak point. If Kong can get a weapon that can pierce into those gills, he can do a lot of harm to Godzilla. And of course there's also the eyes and possibly the throat. If you've seen the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, or perhaps the meme based on it, eat your greens! As Kong jams a tree down Godzilla's throat to stop his atomic breath. And this Kong, more than smart enough to do the same thing. So, who is my money on? Kong or Godzilla? Well, win-loss record, so far, Kong is 1 and Godzilla at 0. Most people are rooting for Godzilla, but I'd say, although they specialize in different areas, Godzilla's the tank, and Kong's more the DPS type. Can Godzilla tank damage better than Kong can dish it out? I don't know. Personally, given that neither of them is really depicted as a bad guy, I don't think the fight will result in the death or even definitive defeat of either one of them. I think they will fight for a while. They're going to give us a really, really awesome monster battle, and then unite against a bigger threat. Possibly, I'm thinking Destroya. I think Destroya would be a good choice to throw against them. I would say King Ghidorah, but they're already doing King Ghidorah in the next Godzilla movie, and you don't want to do the same monster twice in a row. That could kind of soften up the significance of King Ghidorah. So that's my expectation for the movie, because Godzilla is intentionally avoiding harming civilians during the 2015 Godzilla movie. Kong, similarly, only attacks when he's attacked. He recognizes what is a threat to him and what isn't. These are two of the gentlest incarnations of the two. That's surprising given how dark and gritty their movies look versus the actual depiction of them. What we're going to get is two alpha apex animals battling it out for dominance, rather than the straight-up good versus evil story we got in the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, back when Godzilla was still evil. But you didn't come here to hear me talk about what I think will be a draw between the two, did you? You want to know, when it comes down to it, Legendary Pictures versions, Kong or Godzilla? Who is my money on? Who do I think would really win in a knockdown, drag-out, no-way-out fight? I'm going to go against the popular consensus. I'm going to say Kong. Godzilla is powerful, but Kong is smarter. At least this version of Kong. Assuming their heights are roughly equalized, Godzilla may still be bigger, but Kong is going to be on roughly the same scale. From what I've seen Kong do, I think he has enough strength to take the fight out of Godzilla. Maybe not kill him, but enough to repel him. That's who my money's on. King Kong. And we've got 3 years until we find out. Gonna be a hell of a wait. Tell me what you think in the comments. Who do you think will win? Kong or Godzilla? monkey versus lizard. Until next time, this is Vinnie D, out. Be good.